And welcome back to our coverage of ONS 2017. We're here with Dave Ward. He's the Chief Technology Officer of Engineering at Cisco. And Dave, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Abe.
Well, thanks for being here. I have to comment about your shirt before we start.
You like it, don't you?
I do. It's multicolor, and we're in a multi-vendor system here. So there's some confluence there, if I may.
Thanks, Abe, dig the blue suit too.
I appreciate it. I had to say that. I'm sorry. I digress. Okay, so we're talking today about the maturation of NFV, possibly some iterations of NFV. I want to talk, or I'd like to have you comment on maybe the previous iteration and maybe what the inflection point was for the new iteration of NFV.
Sure. So, as you know, and as the industry knows, a lot of the hype around this and the hype cycle around NFV did start with SDN. So we just have to back up a little bit to talk about SDN. SDN was about the configuration, provisioning of networking kit, physical or virtual. The virtual part is NFV. And when we started that a few years ago, it was all about doing a lift and shift from a hardware-based appliance to a hypervisor-based appliance. And that's really what the industry has worked on. And here in the Linux Foundation at OPNFV, it's based on OpenStack, and it's really hypervisor-based. What's really interesting is that was the first inflection point and critical for the industry to get to the point where you have an orchestrated network using SDN, analytics, and creating a reactive network. But second, now we've got containers on the scene. And what's interesting is that there's just an incredible boatload of hype around containers, deservedly so, great technology, but we still have yet to apply the functionality, lessons learned, experience, and in particular, write the code around virtualizing containerized network functions. And so that's really the second wave. And it's going to really determine the pace at which providers, service providers, and enterprises are going to deploy these virtualized functions.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk sort of industry-wide, industry at large, about operationalizing NFV. Open source community has been focusing on that for quite some time. Would you say the open source community has led the way there? And it's not a leading question, I'm not really asking you that question.
Well, I'd say that when the industry came together, again, around SDN, then around NFV, and trying to build out OPNFV with providers, it was the first time providers, vendors, solution integrators, et cetera, actually came together as an ecosystem to work on code in public. So almost necessarily, the work in open source right now is outpacing the deployment, the operationalization, the integration into existing tooling or new tooling, as the case might be. So yeah, open source is leading the way.
Wait, so would you say that NFV is meeting the promise of deploying services very quickly, as that was the intention?
So that is a leading question. So the reason why it's a leading question is there's a presumption that it's been widely deployed, and really you have to look at very specific segments where virtualized network functions are really running that business. Video delivery is one. There is no doubt that scaling out, whether it's linear TV or VOD or cloud DVR or these pieces, from a central office or out of what would be out of a cloud, is absolutely leading the way, and that flexibility is there. But the reason why it's a leading question is when you look at the promise of NFV, can I switch from virtualized business security services to mobility video delivery services to all of a sudden I want to create a voice over IP or I want to do a virtual packet gateway? That flexibility has really not been deployed at scale. And what's interesting, and it will determine the economic viability of NFV over time, is can I set an economic value on the value of agility or the value of flexibility? And we've yet to be able to mix and match or create a generic service catalog out of virtualized network functions that is flexibly rearrangeable at any point in time. So that's beyond the tip of the spear, but that certainly is what the industry is working towards. But I think, Abe, what it's also showing is that there's a number of gaps in the industry. We don't have an open source community working on what is that service catalog. We don't have an open source group yet working on how to link together identity, whether Abe is watching video on his mobile phone, I'm watching it in my living room on a TV set. Those are two different forms of accessing the network, two different encoding rates to be delivered. That flexible rearrangement hasn't occurred, and if NFV literally is just a lift and shift from physical appliances to virtual on computers instead of those physical appliances, that's really a density and scaling play than it is really achieving that flexibility that NFV promised. There's no doubt The industry wants to get there. There's no doubt that the movie will play out that the performance, scaling, and feature set of those virtualized functions running on generic compute will dictate whether or not that can be flexibly rearranged and be truly economically viable.
I hope you don't think this is the next one's a leading question, but do you think the industry again is beholden to what you guys are doing here in the open source community?
Beholden is a very, very strong word. I think the industry is learning a ton from coming together as an ecosystem, not being beholden, and certainly not beholden upon traditional, complete, vertically integrated solutions. And really the key thing here is how are the blend of value-added proprietary implementations of something and open source going to be mixed and matched together at a point in time to deliver unique value and intellectual property for an operator or enterprise. And what's different about the way things were in the past, where I bought a turnkey vertically integrated solution from somebody, to now is that it hasn't gone full artisanal yet, where everybody's putting together whatever they want in any way, but there needs to be solutions that are supported, that can be debugged, that can be operated, et cetera, and so it'll be a mix and match as we move through this technology evolution.
Dave, as CTO of engineering and chief architect at Cisco, you posted a fairly recent blog, and this is what you said in it, and I'll just read it verbatim off my page here. You said, NFV is complex, there's a ton of moving parts, there are layers upon layers, and there are very, very few people that in fact, if any, can hold the entire architecture in their head and keep track of it. What did you mean by that?
So the point I was trying to make there actually was that there's been a recent movement talking about the whole stack developer. And really, whether it's an IT developer or it's somebody trying to get a data center network to work together to deliver a service. And this notion of whole stack developer is that to write the best application or to write an application at all, you should really know every layer underneath, how it works, how it interacts, and how it sets up and creates that entire environment. So the point I was making is that is completely unreasonable. And in fact, we want to get to a no stack developer where they can write to a service layer that then can instantiate that intent without that developer having to know each and every layer, each and every module, each and every open source project, et cetera. Instead, I'm writing my application, it's a video delivery application, it has a few requirements and parameters, and please just deploy this and deploy this optimally and efficiently for me. So the point again I'm making is the notion of a whole stack developer to write one of those services and deliver one of those services is 100% not my goal. My goal is the exact opposite. I'd like them to know nothing about it, and instead the system actually functions correctly and programs that intent.
So if I asked you where we were or where we are on the NFV maturation cycle this time next year, what would be your response?
So I think what we're going to see next year is even more open source projects coming together and coalescing to build, whether they're production quality or close to it, stacks that actually operate together. Because there's been so many communities that have formed and so much technology and so many lessons learned, but really bringing them together to deliver something instead of just being islands and pockets of technology. Pockets of technology are awesome. You know, as a technologist, like I'd like to really geek out on any one particular subject, but when you want to create a solution, a business, an outcome, and deliver a service, they need to be integrated together, and we're going to see more of that. Now, that being said, we will see some of those holes filled over time. Identity, policy, networking in containers, the orchestration of compute, networking, security, and storage as a concept. That's not being talked about this year. Really, it's a whole lot of talk about networking and networking compute, but what about security and storage? All of those come together to play to deliver that service. And so these are some of the advances we're going to see either later this year, next year, or very soon after that.
It's good to see the carrier and vendor community come together sort of under one roof in the open source community, if I can call it that. It's also good to talk to you, someone who's been around for a bit and now doing some great work at
Worldly,
Cisco.
Abe. I'm worldly.
Yeah, I can see that. All right, Dave, thanks for your time.
Thanks a ton, Abe.
All right, and for all of our coverage here at ONS 2017, you can log on to tinow.org. So long.